Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining Essential Image tonight with special guest Stephen Ross. Stephen is a good friend of mine, and he is a realtor extraordinaire, and he's the author of an upcoming book, and I'm going to let him tell you more about that. So, Stephen, welcome. Why don't you introduce yourself to the folks and let us know what you're up to?
Well, thanks, Luis, and good evening. I am, yes, a realtor, and as Luis said, I do have an upcoming book. It's called The Greatest Door-to-Door Salesman in the World, and it's my story of knocking on 100,000 doors and what I've learned over the last 11 plus years. And if you've read Og Mandino's book, The Greatest Salesman in the World, there's kind of a little bit of a play on that, but that's not really what it's about. That's where I got the idea. And that's what Luis asked me to come here and talk about.
So do you really knock on doors, and how many have you knocked on over the last 10, 11 years?
Well, I really do knock on doors. Otherwise, how could I come up with that title, really? And I have not knocked on 100,000 doors yet, but this spring, we'll see how the weather goes. It's been a great start to the year. Really, a lot of days I've been out this year, and I will hit 100,000 sometime this spring, most likely, weather holding up. And that's a lot of doors. In fact, when I was doing a training earlier today with some other agents, and I asked them, there's about 20 agents, and I said, how many of you have knocked on doors before? And about half the room raised their hand, which was pretty good. But if I asked them to say, well, how many of you knocked on? And no one could say exactly how many, and it was like a couple of times. I tried it once or twice, and then a year or two later I tried it once again. But I've been doing this for 11 years.
Wow.
That's a long time.
And does it really work? What's been your level of success with knocking on doors?
You know, that's a great question. And the reason I was pausing is because I was somewhere over the weekend and I was telling someone about my book and about the number of doors I've knocked on, and she immediately dismissed it. She says, no one cares about knocking on doors. That's passé, it's irrelevant, and frankly, it's uninteresting. And I thought, okay, that's your opinion, you're entitled to it, but I do believe it works. And you know, if you're in real estate sales, and this book doesn't apply to everyone, and we could probably cover that in a little bit, but in real estate, knocking on doors does work because what are you selling? Homes. That is where the inventory is, and you know what? That's actually where the people live. So you need, in real estate, it's really simple. You're connecting people and property, and when you go door to door, there's the people and there's the property. So it actually does work, and it's not the only way to be successful. I would say the biggest thing about going door to door is there's a lot of other lessons, which is why I wrote the book in terms of going door to door. But
so tell us, what have you learned over the last 10 years that you would not have learned had you not been knocking on doors for 10 years?
A lot. I don't think that's the answer. That's the answer, though.
And I'm sorry, repeat that.
I said a lot, but I don't think that's the answer you were looking for.
No, I mean, you know, it's such an interesting thing to do because working from home, I see what goes on around the neighborhood. And I'm one of those guys who doesn't open the door unless I've invited someone to my home. And I see people coming to the door all the time, and you know, they knock 2-3 times, and I just don't open the door. I'm sure you run into some of that. How do you deal with the level of rejection that I'm sure you find in that approach to sales?
Yes, and this is I'll answer that a couple different ways because you asked, what have I learned? And it's not even unique to real estate, because if you're in any type of business or if you interact with other people, the biggest thing is not to take it personally. And it's easy to say that. Well, hey, Luis, go eat dirt, right? Well, I know you, so I'm saying that in jest. But if someone said something like that, it's very easy to take things personally. And it's easy to knock on the door and have someone answer it and then look at you. And before you could even say hello, they shut the door. Or they could say something rude or whatever. And it's very easy to take it personally. But you know what? They don't know me. They don't know anything about me. So it's not personal, right? And when you do anything like that for as long as I have, you learn to not take things personally. There are times where it does feel personal, but I think in life, it's given me a way to really figure out how to detach myself from a situation and not take things personally and really take a step back. And that could be true in sales. It could be true when you're negotiating. It could be true in working with teams, because teams involve other people. So it really applies in all areas. And I would say that's probably the number one thing I've gotten. There was a follow-up to that. I don't remember what else did you ask me?
It was just how do you deal with the rejection? Really, that's the biggest part. Because I've been in sales, and we're always told, the more no's you get, the more yeses you're going to get, and that's very true. But I mean, you got to have a thick skin, especially when you're. I think it's different being rejected, say, on the phone when people hang up on you, versus being rejected face to face, right? That I think that's hard to do, and that's very admirable that you do that. And I'm just curious, how do you deal with that?
Well, the first is I have 3 intentions when I'm going to the door. And the first intention I have is to leave someone better off than when I found them. Now, I know that on some level that might sound a little almighty, like, who are you to leave? I mean, what are you going to, bless someone when you're at the door? That's not quite what I meant. What I meant is I realize I'm walking on your property without your permission. I'm knocking on your door and interrupting your day. And you may not have invited me over. In fact, you definitely have not invited me over. And if you are not able to talk or you don't want to talk to me, if nothing else, I could smile and tell you to have a great day. Everyone could use a smile and well wishes. So if that was the best I could get, that would be a win. But often you'd be surprised, about 25% of the people actually are home and open the door. And if I have some sort of conversation with them, my intention is to leave them better off on some level. It's not to try and get something from them or coerce them to do something. And when you come from that perspective, every door can be a win. Every door can be a win. And so it doesn't feel like rejection to me. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, that definitely helps. What would you say is the biggest misconception people have about real estate people, especially door-to-door real estate folks? I mean, that's kind of a long question, but I'm sure there are misconceptions out there. What would you say some of the ones that stick out for you are?
Well, as you know, I'm originally from California, and that's where I sold real estate before I came to Colorado. And there's definitely a lot more real estate agents and other people that go door to door in sunny Southern California. I don't run into too many real estate agents in Colorado that go door to door. I've heard of people who used to do it. I don't run into too many people who currently do it. In fact, I've never, ever in 7.5 years run into another agent out at the doors at the same time I've been out. Having said that, I think the most common misconception of real estate agents in general is no different than any other profession, right? Some are good, some are not so good. And when you run up against someone who maybe doesn't take something as serious as someone who works part-time versus someone who works full-time, sure, that's true in any industry, whether they're any other kind of professional.
Yeah. And I'm sure you've knocked on the same door more than once, right?
I have. Now I have. But for many years, my first few years in Colorado, I really just was out and about. I walked from Parker to Castle Rock to the Castle Pines, the whole eastern half of Highlands Ranch, most of Centennial and Denver, up through, say, 8th, 9th Avenue, right along the I-25 corridor. I mean, I was everywhere.
Wow. Have you ever kept mileage?
No, I have not. But I believe it or not, I have tried. But you're such a fit freak. I know you're gonna Jones on this. I do keep. The reason I know I'm almost at 100,000 doors is because I keep track of since 2005 how many doors I've knocked on, what time I started, what time I stopped. So I know on average it's about 33 doors per hour. I have worn a GPS, one of my running watches, a couple times, and kind of on average in an hour, I'm at like an hour, a mile and a quarter to a mile and a half, depending on the neighborhood. So if you worked backwards, we could figure out the mileage, but it's a lot, man.
Yeah. And actually, that brings up a question for me. Being in sales, obviously, goals are so important. And for you to be able to get to the point where you have gotten, you had to have not only just like a great plan, but a very workable plan. Tell us how you came up with the plan, what your actual goal is on a weekly basis on door knocking. Maybe give us an idea of what your close ratios are, or even your open ratios, if you will. But how many doors do you think you open on a regular basis? I'm sure you keep track of that, right?
Sorry to disappoint you. I do not necessarily. And the reason why I don't is because, well, there was two questions there, right? So the first one is like, why do I do it? What's the point? And like any business, you got to talk to people, right? Dogs aren't buying houses. Kids aren't buying houses. Trees aren't buying houses. People buy houses. And so if you want to sell a house, you must talk to people. And early in my career, my very first couple months, I met my real estate coach and he said, you know what? This is a really simple business. Knock on heads, knock on doors, pick one. Of course, at the time, I thought, I'm a UCLA graduate. I've worked on Wall Street. I'm not knocking on doors. That's for the common people. I don't do that. Of course, 3 months later, when I was out of people to talk to, I realized maybe I should try this knocking on doors stuff. And frankly, you know what? I sucked. I mean, I was really bad for a long time. And I wouldn't even say that I'm excellent now, but I definitely have gotten better, obviously. With 100, you got to be really lame not to have improved over that length of time. So that's kind of why, I mean, I just needed people to talk to, and knocking on doors was really just the simplest way to schedule time to go out and talk to people. So it really was just, I'm lazy and it was easy to do. I know that sounds contradictory. If you're lazy, why would you go out and waste all that time and walk around and talk to people? But if you do believe that you need to talk to people to be successful, it is effective. Then the follow-up question was closing ratios, right? Is that what you said?
Yep.
So, I mean, I know that on average it takes anywhere from 150 to 200 people to produce a sale in real estate. That's a pretty good number, unless you're either really, really good or you don't talk to enough people. But if you're out working every day, that's about what it takes. So that's one ratio I use. However, in terms of what it's kind of fuzzy because I'll go out and maybe, like last year as an example, maybe 20%, 25% of my sales came directly from the doors. Like I knocked on the door and someone answered and they bought or sold a house. But close to 40%, almost 50% of my sales every year are usually indirectly related to the doors, right? I've someone that I know from the doors refers me business, or a client that I met originally from the doors refers me business. So in the end, right, it's back to that old model. In any business, people do business with people who they know, like, and trust. And so I do have that business. But I like to say, and people like to say, when you're out at the doors, it's stirring the pot, right? You're out in flow, talking to people, being in action, as opposed to sitting here in my office, twiddling my thumbs.
So what you do is so applicable to really all salespeople, not just real estate salespeople. And you're writing a book about this. Tell us how does what you do apply to every other salesperson out there?
Well, I think we all, for the most part, if we're out selling, I mean, right, you could sell a book on Amazon, you could sell stuff on the web. And so if you have a product or service that doesn't need interaction, then what I'm about to say doesn't apply, right? Because there's tons of guys out there who are expert at writing copy and designing sales funnels and channels. And so I'm not talking about that. But if you sell, my wife is in the network marketing business. Before that, she was in the fashion industry. So she was selling. Ultimately you sell, right? You have clients that, they don't just call you out of the blue. We wish it was that easy, right? You don't have some magic pill,
right.
Do you? No,
not really.
No?
I'm working on one, but
Okay. Well, let me know when you get it. So you're just like all of us, right? We all have to go out and connect with people. And the reason knocking on doors has been so helpful for me personally is it's a way to go through a lot of people, again, over a long period of time and begin to see patterns that I think apply in any type of sales or frankly, in any type of endeavor you're up to. As you know, we're both runners. We both like to run. We both like to run long distance. And life is not a 10K. Life is not a 5K. Life is a marathon. In fact, life is really like an ultra marathon, right? It's long and it's painful at times. And selling is no different. And, all the chapters in the book really have nothing to do. I shouldn't say nothing because I use my real estate sales as an example, but the lessons apply to anything. And, to give you an example, one of the chapters is to be open versus being right? Being open versus being right. Now, when you've knocked on as many doors as I have, and you've seen a lot, there are patterns, right? Oh, this type of house, they're never home, or these types of people would never buy, or this kind of age group is never moving unless something drastic happened. It's so easy to start to say, I know what's about to happen. But the reality is, I don't know, right? I really don't know that someone had a death in the family and they need to relocate to another part of the country. Or I don't know that they had an economic windfall and they need to buy a bigger house. Or I don't know that someone got hurt and they fell and they need a single story, right? I don't know. And so easy in life with people around us or on a sales call, we start making these assumptions. Well, I know how this is going to go and I know how they're going to react, but really I don't. And when I can just sit there and be open to what's about to happen and what's going on with people and what they really need, it's an opportunity for something new to arise. Does that make sense?
Yep, makes total sense. Now, when you were saying when you started knocking doors, reminded me of a story of my own. I think I may have told you this one, but many, many years ago, I was working for the now defunct MCI, and I had just moved to Los Angeles, and I was managing a team of salespeople. And some folks might appreciate this, but they said, "Hey, come back. We want to see what you do." I told them I want to see what you do, so let me join you knocking doors. What they were doing is they were selling long distance, door to door in Los Angeles. So I went one day. I said, "Sure, I'll come check it out." And I drove to Compton. And if you know where Compton is, if you've seen the movie anyway. And I didn't know this. I was brand new in Southern California, and I showed up, in my nice shiny car, my nice suit, and the sales guy.
Sucker.
You are not going out like that. We're not going to let you knock on doors like that. And anyway, but it was a learning experience because, in LA, you're knocking on those big, thick metal doors. And it was so interesting to me. And to some extent, it made me a better salesperson, but it really traumatized me against going door to door. But what would you say is the most interesting thing that's happened to you when you've been knocking on doors?
There is no one. There's many. And I can give you two different wild examples. One is, this is the craziest thing that's ever happened to me. This is when I was back in California. I had, you go up the walkway to the house, and then they're either home or not, and then you're walking back down. And so I need to do a visual, but it's not going to work. But I'm coming down the walkway, and I look to the left. I'm coming back down to the sidewalk, and I hear something, right? I hear like humming, like weird humming. and I look to the left, and I kid you not, man, a swarm of bees is just shooting down the street, right at me. And I just duck, and the swarm of bees goes right past me, and I look, and it just continues on down the street. I have never in my entire life seen a swarm of bees like that. And like, what are the odds right when I'm coming down the street? I mean, it was crazy. Yeah, that was interesting. But I would say one of the more remarkable things is it's really about the people you meet. I mean, it's just, in the end, it's an incredible gift. I say it's a privilege to get to do what I do every day, to go out and meet people and talk to people and connect with people. And there's a woman I met maybe a couple years ago, and I just liked her. And we were chatting a while, and she had no real estate plans, but we were talking about some other stuff, and it sounded like she might be a good fit to be a client of my wife's. And I connected them, and they've become not only really good friends, they've done a lot of business together, but most importantly, their friendship is, they both rely on each other a lot, and they're both grateful, eternally grateful for one another. And people ask them all the time, how did you guys meet? And they both say, well, Stephen knocked on her door and introduced us. I mean, just crazy. Like, how does that happen? And I think that's pretty awesome.
If you could do anything over again in your door knocking career, what would you do differently?
You know, I don't think I would do anything different, because I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't. I think being a little more open, right, and a little more willing to fail faster, because I was very resistant in the beginning. I really didn't want people to yell at me or get mad at me. And I did a lot of things just to be nice at the door. And it although it was great, it didn't lead to a lot of business. And I could have done more business. And as much as I love talking to people and being out there every day, right, in the end, this is my business, and I still have to feed my family. And I could have made a little bit more money in the beginning, but you know, it's a process, and everyone's on a different journey. And I've seen people come into the business and, you know, go a lot faster, and there's people that go a lot slower. And you know what? There is no right and wrong. There's just the pace that's for you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I would say that this is such an interesting thing to me for salespeople to to really understand some of the dynamics that come, or the benefits that come with what you do. And when you look at the market in Colorado, for example, you know, there are a lot of realtors. The market's really growing, at least in my, I shouldn't say growing. The values are going up, and I think that makes life a little harder for you. But even beyond the nuances of the sales process itself, one of the things that I've noticed about you, and I think this is very applicable to salespeople, is your thoughtfulness. And I can tell the folks watching that from the time I met Stephen, you know, he would send me a running book, for example. Just, you know, he thought about something I said and it struck him, and he sent me a book, or he'd send me something interesting, or an email, or just a phone call. And I think that goes such a long way in establishing relationships. Can you talk a little bit about your process, because it has to be very sincere, would you say?
Yes, it does. And, you know, I'm going to combine two things to answer your question. About 45 minutes before we got on this, what is this thing? What are we on?
A blab. It's a blab.
Blab.
We're blabbing.
Before we got on this blab, I'd found out that someone I knew, I don't know, it doesn't really matter, but I found out basically there was about 3 sides of transactions that I missed out. I just missed it for whatever reason. It was about $2.5 million worth of sales. That's a pretty good chunk of change, right? And it was a little upsetting. It was upsetting. But I also remember that if you want to do a lot of business, and if you want to be successful, you're also going to fail a lot, and you're going to miss a lot. And in the end, I'm around a lot of business that I don't get. And it goes back to not taking it personally. It gets back to focusing on the process, and it gets back to focusing on people. Some people want to work with me and some don't. And I could take that personally, but it's better if I don't, right? It's much better if I just say, you know what? Yes, sometimes there's lessons to be learned and things I could do better. But in the end, it's not going to serve me to be upset and bitter, but to focus on the people who appreciate me and value me. And that's the thing. My clients, the clients that I do get, appreciate me more. They value me more. They listen to what I have to say. And I don't tell people what to do, but I give them great information so that they can create great outcomes for themselves. And I just have to remind myself that in the end, that's what it's about, right? You're a friend of mine, and the people that I meet at the doors become friends of mine. And it's really to serve them and help them, even if they're not moving. So, it's just having that awareness, I think, is really what it is, as opposed to the opposite.
Yeah. A friend of mine once said, he did a networking seminar. He said, networking and sales are very much about the other person, very, very much about generosity. What is it that you can do for them? And I know that I've been to the, networking events where first thing they say is, can I make up an appointment with you? And I'm thinking, wait a minute, you don't even know me. And you're jumping right to try to sell me something. And it's a different process, obviously a different life cycle for your sales. We have just a couple of minutes left. I know that we have some folks watching. If there are any questions for Stephen, I would like to open it up for those. You're welcome to type your questions at the bottom. And while folks are thinking of a question, what closing remarks do you have for our audience? And please tell us about your book, what your plans are, and anything else you want to add.
So the book will be out this summer. Like I said, it's called The Greatest Door-to-Door Salesman in the World. And my disclaimer is I'm the worst door-to-door salesman in the world. Yet somehow I've been successful. So I definitely believe there's a lot of great, I don't want to say advice, because who am I to tell people what to do? But there's a lot of lessons learned. And if I can help save someone some of those lessons, then that was really the intent of the book.
So due out this summer. That's the plan?
That is the plan. And there's a website. It's not up, but it will be The Greatest Door-to-Door Salesman in the World. So create a bookmark to this, and we'll get you on a list. Probably about the next week, we should have it ready to go.
Yeah. So if folks want to get in touch with Stephen Ross, where can they reach you?
They can reach me at Steven.Ross, STEVEN.ROSS at StucyRealty.com, STUCY Realty.com.
Okay. We will put a link to your sites and to your contact information on the YouTube version of this as well. But I really want to thank you for your time, Stephen. Really appreciate what you do. I've seen you work incredibly hard. I wish you nothing but success with your business, with your book. And we need to figure out the next time you and I go for a good run.
Yes, absolutely. Awesome. Thank you, Luis.
All right. Thank you so much. Hang on just a minute.
All right.